Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Brian Sebastian's Movie Reviews and More. Today, we have a very special guest. He epitomizes inspiration and actualizing your dreams. Coming all the way to us from the beautiful Canary Islands, it is my pleasure to welcome my friend, Michael Bryan. What makes Michael special is that he's a motivator, he's a very successful international artist, entrepreneur, and speaker. But for a man who's got so many successful accolades behind his name and on his resume, you'd think many of these things come easy to him. But like some of our heroes, he's got a steeper mountain that's much more rugged than many of us have to climb. Being diagnosed with cystic fibrosis, diabetes as a young boy, he has also developed, unfortunately, an introverted demeanor. But Michael, instead of accepting that, he has chosen the more difficult path to be able to reach out and help others with suffering from the same debilitating illness, which today I think is very applicable to what we're experiencing with isolation and things like that. Michael, he has developed several platforms that many of you can access, and they're such as Facebook. He has he's got a successful Facebook page. He's also a very successful #1 Amazon best-selling author. And it's my pleasure to welcome to you my friend, Michael Bryan.
Hey, Michael, congratulations. That's a lot of great stuff.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's been I watched a memory about a week ago saying that I got one of my first sort of I've made it moments was about 3 years ago. So it's been a very, very long, but very fruitful and eventful 3 years. It's amazing what can happen in such a short space of time.
Michael, so for our audience out there, what would you say introverted represents? Is it more of something beyond being shy? And also, is it something that, is it part of that nature-nurture debate? Is it something that is genetic, or is it something that you may develop due to outward stimuli?
I think that if you looked at the mother's side of my family, it would prove that it wasn't genetic. My mother is a bit of a social butterfly, if you will. She does a lot more of the talking when she comes to the events and things that when she had the privilege of attending an awards event, she was talking to everybody much more than I was. So there's a lot to be said for the nature versus nurture thing. But what I would say is you can be introverted but still be confident. You can be introverted but still be shy, I guess. And I think that when it comes to the difference between being someone who's introverted and someone that's extroverted, it's about how you deal with the stimulation of being around people. Some people thrive on it, they soak it up, they process it, and it feels amazing, and they just go with it, and that's how they feel themselves. That's where their energy comes from, all that kind of stuff. Whereas if you're an introvert, that can be overwhelming, and everyone's got limits. So for some people, 3 is a crowd. For some people, 5 is far too many. Whenever I go to a conference or an event, even if I just so happen to be one of the speakers at the event, I'm still like standing outside of what's going on. I'm still not involved. I'm on the outside. I'm more of an observer, if you will, of what's going on rather than actually getting involved. So I think that for a lot of people, it's managing that level of like mental stimulation of being around people. And very often that happens no matter what it is. I mean, we're talking about introvert, extrovert right now, but even sort of just information processing in general. You know, we get a lot of information all at once, some people can process that much quicker than others can. Everyone's got their own limits and what they can process and how they deal with things like, even things like major incidents in people's lives as well. For some people, they need a week to process it. Other people can process it a lot quicker than that. Other people need a bit longer than that. So it's more about how you process the information and how stimulated you get by being around people. So I know for myself, 4 tends to be my limit. Any more than 4, it's a struggle. And very often, it's different with the podcast, different with this situation now, because I know that you're asking me questions. It's a very different dynamic compared to if I'm in a group of 3 or a group of 3. If I'm in a group, I can find it hard to know when it's my turn to speak. Or is it directed at me? Should I share my thoughts on it? Are my thoughts even valid? I spend so long inside my own head, I can sometimes forget when it's my turn, if you will. But then by then, the topic that I've been thinking about could have gone and disappeared. And I've got to think about something else. Because I was like, okay, this is my bit. This is the bit that I want to share. And then before you know it, the conversation's gone somewhere else. And I've got to rethink about what to say. And sometimes I've had situations where I know what my thing is that I'm going to say, but somebody else could say it. And then I go, oh, well, I don't need to speak then. And then it's not that I've got nothing to say. It's that if somebody else says it, why would I say it? There's no point in repeating the thoughts. See? So I spent a lot of my time, particularly when I was first embracing this whole introverted inside my own head kind of thing of how do I navigate social situations when it is difficult, when it is a bit overstimulating or a bit overwhelming? How do I deal with it? How do I handle it? How do I figure this whole thing out? And I had to put together like strategies and statements and little things that I could say that meant I was contributing, even if I was just confirming what somebody else said, or saying that I agreed with that, or whatever it was. So some of them were things like, that makes perfect sense, or that was something I was thinking of as well. And those little things like that can allow me to like pop in and pop out of conversations without being overly the center of attention or trying to repeat what somebody else said. So it became a massive learning curve when I was outside of my comfort zone, socially, or just interacting with people, even virtually. You know, I've been on shows like this where I'm not the only guest. So there could be like 3 other people and then me and 1 host, 3 guests. And I wouldn't know when it was my turn to speak because it wasn't very well sort of this person, then this person. It got a bit random. You had to like speak whenever you had a thought kind of thing. And that was difficult for me. I was the quietest on the show. just by, and that's online. There's nobody else in the room, but virtually there's like 4 of us. And I still don't know when to do it. I've still not figured it out because it's different when you're next to someone. You can read their body language and how to respond and react and all those things. But virtually it was a completely different ballgame. And that was with the tools I had now. I was still like, what's going on? How does this work? How on earth do I navigate this thing? I've not got a clue. And it's so difficult to do. It's so difficult to do it in the right way because, you know, I've had moments where people, oh, you're really quiet. And it's like, no, not really. I just don't know when to talk. So it's a very difficult endeavor for someone. It's not the natural state. That's the thing. It's not an easy thing. It's not something some of us even want to do. Some of us don't really need the social interaction. We don't need it. We don't crave it. We don't really thrive on it. So when we're in those situations, we know that we're choosing to do it. It's an allocation of our time. It's something we actually want to do, but we don't need to do it. So there's an element of choice involved that some people don't factor in. They don't take that into account.
Michael, everything you just said is the reason why a lot of us went into radio. We were shy. We were introverts. we didn't always want to go and ask that person out or to the dance. And I look at myself as just being the moderator. And so when I have 4 people in the studio, I always just wanted 4 people. I felt that was enough. Me, 1, 2 co-hosts and a guest, or me, whatever, if I have one of the other girls available, and then 1 or 2 guests, and then certain people will throw themselves into it. But I always wanted to keep it 4. So on some shows, I had 6, 7 people in the studio because I didn't feel it was right to drop someone out because everybody deserved to be there. And then we were always booked up 3.5, sometimes 5 months. So everything that you said, I personally can relate to, because I always felt I'm like that. Even when I go to events and people are wanting to do interviews, I'm like, I'm throwing everybody up first, let them have their due. And I want to sit back, I want to be able to notice the room. And then people will say, you're not saying anything. I'm like, I'm looking at the room. I'm looking to see who I want to help. I'm looking to see if I want to talk to someone, because I like smaller crowds also.
Yeah, and it's a very strange dynamic, because when I first started my own show, initially it was to learn from people. So I was a big learner, whether it was podcasts or reading or whatever it was. I felt that I could get more from my own time, I guess, if I had the chance to ask people the questions I wanted to know. You know, things like, if I could pick this person's brain for an hour, it would be amazing. That was how I initially started my own show. And I think the idea that it's a social thing is a bit strange for people. And someone said, well, why doesn't it just be social, just a social thing? That doesn't mean extroverts don't feel that way as well. So what's the main difference? What's the massive distinction between extroverts and introverts? And they kept prodding at me until I could come up with an answer they were happy with. And the only thing I could come up with was how they spend their time when it's proactive. And what I mean by that is, unless I'm speaking at an event that's offline and I've got to go there, I don't search for conferences on a weekly basis. I don't look for the nearest meetup or the nearest coffee morning. I don't look for places to go where I know there are large groups of people. I know friends that are booking conferences for next year. I know people that are booking like meetups, and they're researching and they're doing all these things that I simply don't do. I'm probably noisy about 2 hours a day at the most. When it's on camera, podcasts, whatever it is, 2 hours of the day, and that's pretty intense. For me, 2 hours is a lot. And the rest of the time, no, it's the complete opposite. I don't do that at all. Some people don't understand that. So I'm not actively trying to socialize with people because I feel like I need to do it. And that's something, the only way I can describe it. The only way I can distinguish between the two is how you deal with the stimulation of being social and what you do with your spare time. Because when I'm on camera, podcasts like this one, although it's fun, I enjoy it. I love talking to people. It's amazing. It's still work. I'm like switched on, if you will, technical term, right? I'm switched on. When we turn off the camera, I'm switched off. And I will chill out. I'll relax. I'll put my feet up to get rid of the whole like buzz of being spoken to and being on camera. And then I'll go, right, I'm not going to sleep for a while because my adrenaline's flying me through the roof. My heart, I'm sweating. It's like, right, me, this is just the way it is. And
Michael,
realize what goes on.
Michael, when I was reading about being an introvert or an extrovert, what I discovered was, and many of our viewers might feel this way, they say that an extrovert, if they go into a crowd or a concert, it energizes them, versus an introvert, it drains them. And so my question to you, Michael, is becoming, as diagnosed as an introvert, is it generally something that occurs young, or is there a life event that may trigger it? And the reason why I ask that is I worry about the social distancing, the social isolation, where some of our viewers have been so cut off from the social world that I worry that going back out, it'll be a whole different, stimuli hitting them, bright lights, people, crowds. And I just want them to understand how to overcome that and feel comfortable again, so that they don't have anxiety or nervousness. So I'm curious for you how you were diagnosed, and if it's something that happens young regarding hormones, or you can be diagnosed later in life.
You bring up an interesting point regarding the future of socializing and what that can mean for essentially training people to be alone more. It's essentially what it is, right? The whole social distancing thing is a form of conditioning, I guess, that people, whether it's on purpose or not, we can debate conspiracy theories if you want, but it's conditioning us either way to be okay with our own company, only spending time with close family. I know some places are more locked down than others, so I can't speak to people that aren't in massively lockdown situations. But for myself, I live alone, so I haven't got friends or family. During the main bulk of our lockdown, I wasn't pulling my hair out after like 4 months. Don't have a lot of hair to pull out, by the way, but I wasn't pulling my hair out, climbing the walls, needing to be around people. And yet there were people freaking out. There were people freaking out within like 2 weeks, wanting to kill their kids, right? And I think that in some ways, the people that are extroverts and they're struggling with the dilemma that is social distancing and being isolated, I think there's a difference between just being used to it and it being a new normal versus what will still fuel you to a certain degree. So chances are, when we come out of lockdown, an extrovert will still feel okay in social situations. It might take a bit of practice, get used to the situation again, but it'll be like riding a bike for some people. They'll just embrace it. They'll be so happy. They'll be loving it. They're like, yes, finally, after 6 months, we're back around people again. They're probably secretly gathering anyway. You can just imagine it. All gather under a bridge somewhere and all play board games, right? I think that there are people out there that are probably still going to do that. And the people that, again, just like riding a bike, at first it'll be difficult, but they'll just get back into it, it'll be fine. Then there are people that are more socially anyway, whether they're extroverted or introverted, and it'll take them a little bit longer, be like a form of exposure therapy, right? Start small and then gradually build up as you get more and more used to the situations. Don't go from zero to a conference unless you're an extrovert, right? I wouldn't advise that. And I think that's to be said for a lot of people. I think everyone should probably build up their social stimulus a little bit. Don't go from zero to a full-blown stadium event. It's probably going to drain you. I wouldn't even go. I think that's the difference. What's your go-to situation when you're allowed? If you crave a stadium event, then go. You're probably an extrovert and you need that. I'd probably crave a coffee. Well,
Michael, I had a friend of mine, and he was a hockey player, and he was one of the tough guys on the team, and they referred to him as the enforcer. And before a hockey game, he would just crank up the heavy metal music, the Metallicas, just to energize him to get out there. So reading about you and things like that, I was almost wondering if that was an introverted aspect of him, even though he seemed very extroverted, but it just put him into that mindset. But for many of our viewers, December 10th and 15th, Michael is going to be doing a speaking conference. Are you able to tell us about that, where people can access it, Michael, that are looking for ways to, get assistance or guidance?
Yeah, the It's a workshop that I'm running with just 2 separate dates. So for people that we can't do one, but they can attend the other, then they can do that. So it's similar to this. It'll be on Zoom. It'll be a workshop for introverts that want to put themselves out there. They want to be more social. They want to use it to their advantage to a certain degree. And music's quite an interesting one, because although I am very introverted, I did one of those personality tests. I think the one with the initials and the letters and everything to figure out what your personality is. And on the introvert extrovert spectrum, I think I was 97% introvert. Apparently that's quite high. So with that in mind, if I said, okay, well, I also used to teach fitness classes, to a lot of people's surprise. But how I got over that was a couple of things. The first thing was music really helps. You'd be surprised at how more energetic you feel if you're listening to the right music. And I do have music that amps me up, music that I love listening to, music that really energizes me. And despite that, I still had to have a break after the class. I was still drained. I was still locking myself in the office straight afterwards. Wouldn't go out for at least an hour. Just like, oh, that was hard work. Oh my God, that was hard work. And that still happens. So sometimes, even with all of the strategies, even with all of the meeting the expectations, right? Because you can't teach a fitness class without there being some level of expectations of what people would expect. I can't get on a spinning bike and be a quiet fitness instructor. This doesn't work. It's just not going to work. You can't motivate people. You can't jazz people up. You can't motivate people, push people, and all those things. You can't do that unless you're a bit energetic yourself. And if it wasn't for the music, I would struggle. If it wasn't for the warm-up, I would struggle. But even afterwards, you still need that time to recharge. I mean, while some of my peers were, some of the other personal trainers, they would do a class and then go bouncing around the gym, talking to people and doing all the other things and do all the cleaning and talking to them and all those. And I would do the class and I would go straight back to the office, lock myself in and not talk to anyone for a good half an hour before I would decide I'll do a lap of the gym, make sure it's safe, and then go back to the office again. So sometimes there's only so much you can do before you realize, hey, you know what? I'm just introverted and I need to get rid of the stimulation and get rid of the energy before I can function again. But music is a big part of it. Having the pre-performance routines, as they used to be called. So when I was in sport and fitness, I used to train my clients to have like pre-performance routines. You know, like you do a certain number of breaths before you hit a ball or kick a ball, or you'd visualize something before you did it. All those would correspond to like, before you do the thing, what do you take yourself through? And it's the same with social situations. It's the same with doing videos, recordings, whatever your cup of tea is, if you will, when it comes to showing up and putting yourself out there. I jazz myself up before a 3-minute podcast recording. I'm only doing it for 3 minutes and I'm still like, come on, you've got this. Let's do that. To go for a walk, do some star jumps. I'd have a drink. I'd have like some caffeine or something just to amp me up a little bit. And I'm only doing it for like 3 to 5 minutes. And then I turn it off, finish, relax. And I'm like, oh, I hope the edit's good. And I'm there doing all the editing to make it all look pretty cool. And there's a lot that goes into it. It's not just about the 3 to 5 minutes of being on camera. And I think some people forget that. I think when you're in the performance world or when you're in the like entertainment world, there's a lot that goes into the actual performing itself. There's a lot that happens behind the scenes. There's a lot that goes on. And some people don't realize that. And what some people probably need to hear is even if you're an introvert or an extrovert, and even though you do all of those things, even if you do everything that I would take you through on those workshops, you just got to accept that sometimes you need to detach if you're an introvert. You just need that break. There's only so I could do everything. That I could practice what I preach 24/7, do everything that it takes me to be as energized as possible. And it would just mean rather than, having to wind down, I would go from really energized to needing to sleep. Like you go from one or the other, where over the years, I've tried to stay reasonably shallow. I'd never get really excited and then I'd need to sleep or enter some kind of coma-like state or something. I'd go like high energy, relax, high energy, relax. I'd never get overly excited because I just know that if I get overwhelmed, overstimulated, I will crash and I will need a break. And I think that what people need to, again, you need to be consistent with it. You can't just do it once and expect it to work. There's an element of consistency. I know your show's been going really well as well. Loads of recordings, loads of episodes. It's been great. It's been great to see. If you need a lot of recovery between recordings, you can't do it every day. You can't do it twice a day. You haven't got the energy. You've not got the break that you need, and very often, but with the book launch, I was almost all go for about 6 months. The only way I could do that was I'd do 2 interviews a week. I'll do this, I'll do that. I'd have 2 days off. And then you just got to manage your break and your self-care almost to be able to be consistent. It's not about the time when you're switched on. It's about how effective are you when you're switched off? How effective is your recovery in between the sort of high energy moments that you need?
You just filled in a lot of pieces for 3 things. I think of my friend, I'm not going to mention his name, but he would immediately come into the room. He would see the microphones and he would start sweating profusely. A well-known actor worldwide. You just answered the question why he did that. And then I would talk to him about music, and then jazz would take him out of that set, because a lot of actors don't like themselves. They're introverts. They're shy. They're uncomfortable. They pretend to be someone else. And that's why they're great actors. And I've talked to almost all of them. It's very interesting to see that, because you just described why someone would come into the room and they'd freak out. They'd see the microphones and they can't do it. They would freeze up. And you're thinking, what's wrong with this person? You just answered that question. The other thing is, do introverts, do they suffer from depression too?
I think there's a lot of precursors to things like depression. And I think that, to me, I have my down moments like anybody else. I speak to people all the time, and it's not sunshine and rainbows every day, not every day. And I think there's a lot to be said for, do introverts suffer with depression? I think it depends on the causes. It depends on what triggers it. It depends on what happens on the lead up to it. Do I think every introvert's depressed? No. I think we get triggered by it in different ways. Yeah. There's some people spend too long alone, and that's their trigger for it. We don't like their own company, and their sort of self-talk changes because they've been spending too long alone. Is that to do with depression, or is that to do with they rely heavily on social interaction? Maybe they want other people to tell them good things about themselves because they don't have that conversation with themselves. So do I think that we do suffer with it? Yeah. I think it's triggered by different things. Because if you like being alone, you're okay with your own company. Very often it's just triggered in different ways.
Interesting. Wow. Yeah. Go ahead, Sherry. Are you going to say something?
Just for our audience, if you're unable to wait for the December 10th and 15th, speaking conference that Michael is doing. His Facebook group, it's called Introverts Impacting Millions. You can access that. And he's got some amazing quotes and inspirational thoughts for you. Michael, you also have a very successful show that gets high reviews. It's called the Ask Michael Show. And on there, he, again, offers inspiration and guidance for by giving you examples of entrepreneurs, accomplished business people. You know, just he's one that likes to lay out avenues to inspire, to get you to go towards your dreams, just like Michael has. But Michael, you just came off from Amazon named you as #1 best-selling international artist. Can you tell us about your book that people are available?
Good for you.
Is also a wonderful Christmas gift.
Yeah, it basically details the journey that I've been on so far. I asked people if I could write a book, what would it be? And my friends were like, how do you overcome like your fears? And how do you do all those like crazy things? And my family was like, you should write just a memoir. Just write like what you've done, what you've achieved. And I combined the two because one of the things that I noticed was if you just give people the stories, they might connect the dots in a way that don't make sense. You know, like when you're a kid and you connect the dots, and when you're older, you realize you didn't connect them in the right order. And you spend a lot of time basically rewiring how you think because no one told you what your sort of experiences meant. You know, like something bad could happen, but it didn't mean what you made it mean. So I realized that I needed to do both. I needed to share with people what I'd gone through. So everything from being introverted, having health conditions, being bullied, not wanting to do anything different or be unique or any of those things, until I realized the only way I would stand out is by being unique and sharing why I'm different. And I wanted people to take the lessons from those things that I took. So it's an element of forcing people to learn the things that I learned, but the stories will allow them to understand where the lessons came from, understand what was going through my mind, what I was thinking, what I was feeling, all those things, because it helps people understand where my thought process comes from, help people understand where my sort of actions have led me to, and why I did what I did, essentially. And it's funny you bring up the Ask Mike show, because very often some people would ask my questions on things just for the way my mind works. It's as simple as that. Some people go, I just love the way you think, and I want your opinion on something. And I go, okay. And I would do it. And then I would go, well, what if I could help more people with this? What if answering people's questions became my thing? And you learn very quickly when you read the book that my mind works differently to most people because of what I've gone through. And I figured that more people needed to hear my random, crazy answers to particularly important questions. And I try to stick to self-improvement, personal development, but every now and again I'll get the odd, what are your thoughts on universal basic income? And I'm like, oh, no one's ever heard that one before. I'll think on it and let you know. So I do get the odd, like, crazy question here and there. And I do have to pick which ones I answer, because some of them are a bit too polarizing for me. I am a bit polarizing just because of the way I am. You either like me or you don't. That's just the way the world works. But I didn't want to pick subjects that alienated people on purpose, just because I don't think it's right. I think you're entitled to your own opinions. And I think there's a difference between how do I achieve something or how do I do something versus what are my thoughts on Black Lives Matter. Because I know that everyone's going to have their own opinions. Whether I share mine or not isn't really going to change that. It's not going to change your opinion on it. It's not going to change how you see it. And my job isn't to make people think how I think. My job is to put how I think to the world's problems, you know, and improving the world one person at a time, which is one of the main goals of the show.
Michael, we got like 2 minutes left. Can you give your social media links for everybody? And you got a new fan, me. I'm going to start checking out your show because I love the stuff that you've been saying, because I have so many people that I talk to daily throughout the years that you just talked about that just fit their profiles. Because some people don't know that, as you found out.
Yeah, so the best places to find me, so Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. The handle's the Michael Bryan. So I spent a while trying to figure out how I should brand myself in a way that other people could find me very easily. So the Michael Bryan is on the three big platforms. The book is on Amazon, and the show is the Ask Mike Show, where it's everywhere, including places like Amazon and TuneIn and places like that as well. So you can find me almost everywhere.
Thank you.
And Michael, you have, again, you're easy to access. And if anyone wants, first thing in the morning, an inspiration, open his page, because his quotes are amazing and they make you feel good. They make you want to do good. And Michael, you're creating an amazing legacy, and you really are a blessing to millions.
Thanks very much. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, like I said, I can't wait to get off here and tune into what you said, because inspiration is what everybody needs. And so with that, this is Brian Sebastian for Michael, for Sherry Nelson. If you see someone out of smile, please give them one of yours, because Michael, you can identify with that. I can identify with that, and Sherry can identify with that. The world needs it. And this is Movie Reviews and More, and we will see you next week.